a reward for any information leading to the conviction of the person or people involved. Over the last 7 years, I have contacted the police on multiple occasions because of the issues I previously discussed. The alcohol-fueled parties, knocked down my fencing, arson, police-identified gang graffiti, theft, trespassing, spray-painted racial slurs, and the driving of motorized vehicles on my property. I have spent thousands of dollars and countless hours cleaning up the dump sites, smashed glass, and vandalized parts of the buildings. I have rebuilt what was left of the house only to have the trespassers destroy what I repair. In addition to what's going on my property, there was a well-known and highly publicized sexual assault that occurred September 26, 2020 of a woman in that area. The assault occurred while the woman was jogging on the Zim Smith Trail very near my property. The alarming incident hits close to home for me because I live only 1 mile away, and my wife and 2 daughters regularly access the Zim Smith Trail from the spot where the attack occurred. This area needs change. My proposal is to change the 10.36 acres of land formerly occupied by the Rod and Gun Club from a land conservation to an R1 Residential 1 or a planned development district that utilizes the R1 use and the area requirements. As part of the proposed zone change, a portion of the parcel could be used for a public trailhead and parking area. This public benefit would be important to our Exit 11 neighborhood and surrounding area, as it would provide a well-lit parking lot and picnic area on the west side of the dead-end road. As part of the zone change, I would propose to donate the land and build the parking lot at no expense to the town of Malta. The specific benefit is necessary for our area because it would give the community a safe place to park their cars while using the Zim Smith Trail and visiting the lenticular bridge spanning the Ballston Creek. People would not be forced to park on the public road or on somebody's private property. Making sure it is well lit will benefit anyone whose workout runs a little late and darkness sneaks up on them. Having picnic tables and some green space would be great for kids playing and will provide families and individuals with a safe place to enjoy the area. On the east side of the dead-end road, I would like to see a small residential development. I have shared this idea with other members of the community, and it has been positively received. Many people express that they too feel these changes are what the area needs to be safe while keeping the integrity of the natural beauty. The dead end of South Rural Road has so many wonderful attractions like the historic lenticular metal truss bridge, the Zim Smith Trail, and the beautiful Ballston Creek. It is a destination spot that needs a parking area, a safe and well-lit parking area, and a picnic spot so people can better enjoy the area's offerings. And with people living and taking care of the land on the east side of the road, it would be a great way to be proactive and stop all the bad behavior that goes on there and prevent any more people from getting hurt. The property's continued abuse had been so bad for such a long period of time that the Department of Environmental Conservation ordered its cleanup. And I am proud to say that with all the hard work and financial investment I made to the Rod and Gun Club, that the Department of Environmental Conservation removed it from its cleanup list and has given the property a clean bill of health. I was also concerned about the possibilities of lead contamination, so I have hired Sterling Environmental out of Albany to perform an extensive environmental site assessment. Initial testing indicates that the site is within acceptable limits and is appropriate for a residential development. And lastly, I have started a Facebook website that has over 70 members now. The members are concerned local citizens who have been made aware of the problems my property is facing and are monitoring the attempts I am making to remedy the problem. We have submitted letters from the local community and law enforcement supporting and asking for the change that I am bringing to your attention. I would also like to invite you to go out to the location so you can see for yourselves why this area needs this change. I appreciate your time and attention to this important public safety matter. Thank you. And does anybody have any questions for me before I refer you to Mr. Scott Lansing? Yes, sir.
Can you help us? I'm not able to see what is in the DEC letter. Can you tell us more specifically what that says? I don't know that I have it up here.
It's a lot of technical talk. I don't really understand it other than the summary indicates that I'm going to refer you to Scott.
I can jump in on that. There was a dump site off on the kind of the northeast corner
Right.
of the site, and Mr. Crawford had gone in, he had cleaned up the debris that was in there, a lot of larger items. He dragged all those items out of there, cleaned that up. And Sterling Environmental worked with the DEC to get a clearance for that particular area. So clearance was provided. I don't have a copy of that letter with me, John, but I'd be more than happy to.
So it wasn't an oil spill or a Superfund
No,
site?
no.
It was just trash, basically?
Just trash, basically,
Okay.
and quite a bit of it, quite honestly. I mean, there was one concentrated area, but then there were other areas where it was kind of scattered, where people more or less just dumped it off the edge of the bank. And Mr. Crawford, again, he did clean up not only the concentrated area, but the entire site.
And the lead, we had been asked as a town to, whether we were interested in it, and at the time, there was a concern about the spent, ammunition there on the site. You guys are, that's what, kept us away from it.
Sure, yeah, no, that's a definite concern. There, we did have testing, or Sterling Environmental performed testing out there on behalf of the applicant. They did test pits around the site, and the levels came back as acceptable levels, unrestricted for residential. There was one spot where it was slightly elevated. That's in the berm or the bank where they used as a backstop. That is outside of the area of the proposed residential development, which I'll get to in a minute. But that was outside of that area. Might require some mitigation, something that we're going to do additional testing on the site if things advance. Additional testing on the site just to be doubly sure that things are okay. But that one area would need attention, and we just haven't gotten to that yet because we're hoping to advance.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, good evening. Scott Lansing with Lansing Engineering. What I want to go through are the site characteristics of zoning and the proposed next steps for the parcel. And I hate to be redundant on some of this, but I do think it's important to stress some different items. As far as the existing conditions on the parcel, this is has a lot of historical attractions on the parcel. We have the Round Lake Rod and Gun Club, which Mr. Crawford went through, about a 30-year occupancy on the site, the Rural Road, lenticular metal truss bridge, and there's also recreational environmental features as well. We have the Zim Smith Trail, which is a paved 11.5-mile multi-use trail, connects Ballston, Mechanicville through Ballston, Malta, Clifton Park, Round Lake, and Mechanicville. So a very large trail system. To have a connection point at the end of Rural Road, I think, is a good benefit to the community. Also at this at the end of Rural Road is the Ballston Creek, 6 Mile Creek, originates at the north end of Ballston Lake, and it exits at Round Lake. So a long waterway that would be a benefit to the public to have access as well. As far as the parcel itself, the overall parcel is approximately 33.14 acres. And this map here, hopefully everybody can see that okay, but along the northern boundary of the parcel is the Ballston Creek. The entire northern boundary of the Ballston Creek. Then there is a light blue area, shaded area around that Ballston Creek. That is the floodplain. And then the red areas shown on the map, those are slopes over 15%. So you can see there are areas of the parcel that are environmentally constrained and deem protection. There's also woods on the parcel. The woodland areas, I think, are pretty visible on this aerial photo. They're basically underneath the red that's shown and then to the north of the red. But what I would like to draw everyone's attention to is the cleared area, which is the former occupation of the Rod and Gun Club. Also within that area of the Rod and Gun Club is our water and sewer utilities. There is along the Zim Smith Trail, there are main lines for both water and sewer, but cutting through the area, portion of the area where the former Rod and Gun Club is, are water and sewer lines that extend to serve other areas of the town. So utilities are available right on this parcel. It's not something where this is an extremely extended parcel out of the reach of water and sewer. Utilities are right on the parcel. As far as challenges of this parcel, I'm sorry, here's a picture of the water and sewer on the site. And this is a picture of the field where the former range was for the Rod and Gun Club. As far as the challenges for Rural Road South, obviously this is a long dead-end street. This is it's tough to see, but basically we have the dead end of Rural Road to the south, about 5,300 feet, about a mile is the intersection of Miller Road. So quite an extension in and from Round Lake Road itself is about 8,100 feet. So it's a long stretch for a dead-end road. As far as the challenges on the parcel, I think they have been expressed by Mr. Crawford: trespassing, illegal dumping, graffiti, drug use, stealing, assault, arson, and a lack of a formal trailhead or parking area at the end of the roadway. This is kind of tough to see, but at the end of Rural Road, there's not really a formal turnaround. It's just the road pretty much just stops with the pavement. There's some gravel off on the edge, but nothing real formal in this area, either for parking or for turning around of vehicles. I think a lot of the challenges that this parcel, this area is seeing are derived from the fact that it is a long dead-end roadway. It's a place where kids would want to go to party because it's not an active area. There's no supervision, nobody driving by, and when I think of the illegal activities, the crime that's going on out there, for the most part, I think criminals are cowards. They want to be in an area where it's desolate, where people can't see them, where they're not monitored. Obviously, you won't have as much crime in an area right outside this town hall because there's people driving by, there's people monitoring, there are people that will call the police or authorities and have things taken care of. So, I think the potential is much higher in an area like this area. I'm going to jump to the zoning for the parcel. This is the overall town zoning map. There is a box kind of in the lower left area. That is the area that we're zooming in here. This is where the rural road parcel is. You can see the red outline. Hopefully you can see where the red outline is. Based on the existing conditions that we looked at before, the good majority of the parcel is zoned land conservation. I think it's zoned that way for a good reason. As we looked at on the previous map, there are areas of slopes and streams and floodplains, things that do require conservation. But there is approximately 10.36 acres of the parcel that are completely out of the unconstrained lands, and that is the area that was occupied by the Rod and Gun Club. And this is, there are other areas on the parcel that are unconstrained, but this is the largest contiguous area. So very difficult to see on this particular drawing, but there is a yellow line around the area, right around this area, where the area of the 10.36 acres is, and that area is flat, void of woodlands, formerly occupied for 30 years, public utilities on site, the water and the sewer. And in our opinion, that 10.36 acres is inappropriately zoned as land conservation. It might be more appropriately zoned as R1, which is the existing zoning immediately to the south. As far as the proposed zoning, what we are suggesting is that perhaps that small area, that 10.36 acres of the overall 33 acre parcel be considered for rezoning to R1 to match the zoning immediately to the south. And again, we feel that's appropriate based on prior occupied use, the land formation, and the fact that it does not contain any constrained lands. We feel that with this change of this particular area, maintaining the LC zone on the balance of the parcel, the goal would be to activate the area, formalize trail access to the Zim Smith, the Lenticular Bridge, and the Ballston Creek. And we feel that the residents would create activity in this area. So increased activity and accessibility, in our opinion, correlates to increased safety. So what we came up with was are some sketch plans of what could possibly be put in this spot. If just that area is zoned as R1, if you run through the density calculations, it would yield approximately 11 single-family homes in that 10.36 acres. Perhaps at the end of that would be a formal cul-de-sac, so you'd have a formal turnaround area for the highway department, for emergency services, for residents, for people within the community. And on the west side, we're suggesting that, perhaps there is a formal parking area, something that could include a small picnic and park area, perhaps a kiosk with the history of the Rod and Gun Club and the Lenticular Bridge. And what we've done are just provided some sketches of what that could possibly look like. So that is essentially it for what we are proposing, and what we'd like to discuss with the board is how that could possibly be done if the board is amenable to this change. It could be perhaps an amendment to the zoning map, something that the R1 zone could possibly include this 10.36 acres, could be a planned development district for the parcel. And we want to get the board's feedback basically on thoughts on this proposal first off, and then how we could possibly do it if we feel it is a good idea. We feel it is an appropriate zoning adjustment, appropriate development, provides trailhead public benefits, activates this area, and provides an increase in security on many different levels. So with that, if there are any questions or comments from the board?
Hey, Scott, I have a question.
Sure.
Your water source is coming from where?
The
Drinking
water
one.
is Clifton Park Water Authority. That's what services basically that entire area.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Scott, I may have missed it in the beginning. What year did Mr. Crawford purchase this property? How long ago?
I purchased it 2014.
Do you remember what the zoning was when you purchased it? Was it also LC at that time?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And were you aware of what the zoning regulations were for LC?
Well, yeah, I looked it up. I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was a nice piece of property I could use for recreational purposes and storage of my personal property and my maintenance equipment and stuff like that. And then after I found out about the land conservatory and the fact that all my stuff was I got burnt down, I lost everything. That's when the land conservatory became a problem for me because I wouldn't be able to stay out there, protect my property, protect the land.
I understand that.
That was something I wasn't aware of that I wouldn't be able to do.
Right, I understand that. But you were aware that it was LC at that time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many acres? 10 that you're looking to develop, roughly?
About 10.36. The overall parcel is about 33 acres. If I could just make a brief statement on the zoning itself. I think when zoning maps are put together, they're put through with kind of broad strokes of these general areas. I'm not sure when a zoning map is put together, they necessarily look at each individual parcel and upland, unconstrained, or areas that require land conservation. So in my opinion, I'm not sure that when this was put together, they looked at the former use that was that occupied the parcel for 30 years. So that's one of our thoughts or things that we want to bring to the board's attention is that, yes, it is zoned LC, but we think there is an area that might have been inappropriately zoned on this particular parcel, and we see a benefit for the potential rezoning of that parcel for everyone.
And Scott, also, while you're there, you mentioned there were other unconstrained lands in addition to the 10 acres.
Correct.
What does that total, do you know?
I apologize, I don't have that handy. I think it's roughly double that, so we have about 10 acres. I know we had done some layouts a while back, and it was a 20-lot subdivision, permitted 20 lots, so roughly 20 acres of the 33 acres. And I can double check and get an exact number for you on that, but that's.
So it can't be ruled out you'd be looking for more if this were approved with a zoning change, that you would put more homes in at a later date.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Would you consider putting more homes in at a later date since you have those unconstrained lands that you've described?
No, I guess the way we're envisioning this possibly happening is just the 10.36 acres being zoned as R1, and if just that 10.36 is rezoned as R1, the density calculations will permit a maximum of 11 lots on that particular area.
But you won't rule that out, correct?
Putting more homes on?
In the future, yes.
Well, I don't think that'd be something allowed. If it's something the town board wanted more homes on there, that would be something that would be entertained, but that's not something that the applicant's asking for.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Scott, when was it zoned LC? Do you know?
I don't know on that. I'm not sure if
Okay.
Jamie or Floria perhaps know that. I think it was some time ago, quite some time ago.
I will say, I have actually parked down there, probably trespassing on your land to park to access the Zim Smith when there's other parking is unavailable. And when you're trying to leave, it's kind of dangerous if the trail is busy. People really shouldn't be parking there as it is. It looks like the parking that you're proposing is on Rural Road, the other side.
Yep.
So you wouldn't be coming out onto the trail like you do when.
I think when the Rod and Gun Club was fully active, there's a parking area on the left-hand side of the road that where I would like to reestablish a
Right.
parking area. It has pre-existing culverts in there. It's a flat surface. It's got hard ground in there. I think it used to be a parking lot when they had activity at the Rod and Gun Club.
Because like I said, it's a little unnerving, especially if there's a lot of bikes. You try to cross, you basically are crossing the trail to get back onto Rural Road.
Scott, under this proposal, who's going to retain ownership of the residue LC lands?
And that's open for discussion. I would imagine the parking area would be something that the town would want dedication for.
Right, but there's 20 acres there. that-
Yes, You know, there could be something that's in a homeowners association that could be dedicated to the town, that could be attached with
Forget
individual
about the
lots.
town.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah, no doubt.
Sir, I'd just like to add that, if this goes through, I would like to live there. I would like to have a house there. And as part of that property, I would like for the property that is, we're gonna save, we're gonna conserve, to be part of that, so I could be a steward and take care of it. Ultimately, what I'd like to do is go out there and be able to take care of the creek like I have been doing. I've been working with environmental conservation and trying to stock brook trout in there. If there's some nice shady areas where I think that the brook trout will thrive, I'd like to reestablish it as a nice, healthy piece of property. And I would take that remaining property and put that or attach it to my property where I lived, and I would be the steward of it.
And on that note, that is one of the common practices for allocating open space land. You can have it divide into a whole bunch of lots and have a line back a ways on those lots, and the area behind that line is deed restricted. Or you could take one lot and have the balance of the land connected to that one lot, but then again, have a line where it's deed restricted. So it sounds like Mr. Crawford's leaning towards having perhaps one lot with a deed restricted, all that land being deed restricted, so it cannot be further subdivided or developed in any way.
Thanks.
Have you considered just building your house down there and just you live there?
I would love to, yeah, but I don't know. This is all new to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I've got with Scott, and Scott's helping me navigate through this. I thought I had to provide a public benefit in order to change the designation of the land, so I needed to come up with a vehicle in order to be able to pay for the parking lot that I gotta put in. I don't have a lot of money. I've lost quite a bit owning this property. So I'm looking for options. Scott has provided me with options that
And-
I think we can work with.
And one thought on that, one house would be great, but if that 10.36 acres is rezoned as R1, which is the adjoining land, I feel that's a fair amount of lots to keep activity in that area. I think you really need activity on the roadway, people driving by, just lights on a home. I think that will deter the negative activities that have been happening in that area. So I would almost say the more homes the better, but 10 or 11 on that 10.36 acres seems like a reasonable number to keep activity in that area. And it marries up perfectly with the 10.36 acres that was formerly occupied, is flat, is cleared, is not environmentally constrained. It just seems appropriate and a bunch of different avenues to achieve the goals we're looking for.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, I mean, I think it's a very interesting idea, and I remember this way back years ago when, the same kind of thing was proposed, and the planning board actually did a site visit and walked around the Ballston Creek, et cetera. On the one hand, this is a very, a persuasive, case that you're making. On the other hand, it's hard for the town to get land conservation, and we've had some experiences recently where, we try to make land conservation and it doesn't work out all that well. This one already having been land conservation, it, introduces that element of kind of preserving open space for the board. But, I think I think you make a decent case, and I think it's something the board may want to consider. I don't know if any other board members have any questions.
I've got an open mind about it, Scott, honestly. I'd want to have it in the research department a little bit, but, I've got an open mind about it. I just think that, we need to take care about sending a message that all of a sudden that the safety of the Zim Smith Trail is going to increase dramatically. Maybe this will help, but, let's not oversell that, point.
You said there's, you've called the police several times and they've come down for investigating things. Darren, I mean, has anybody reported, the sheriff's department or anybody reported any criminal activity down there to the town?
To the town, I don't think so. Obviously, that incident,
Right,
a while back,
right.
that was, well-known news. Other stuff, I've been aware of it from talking, I think, to Mr. Crawford And in other parks, you know, we have issues. I mean, we have issues at Steeplechase, we have issues down
Right.
near Round Lake.
Right.
You know, we've had
Park
issues in other areas in
vandalization of
parks and
parks,
stuff. So
yeah.
it does happen. Now, it doesn't rise to the level of arson that was experienced at the Rod Club. But, and in terms of, well, you have the letter from the captain in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this particular issue. It's not as if we've had a huge amount of input on it. I don't know, Jamie, do you have any other information on Cynthia's question?
No, I don't have any knowledge of that kind of reporting to the faculty. I mean, I will say that the zoning question was asked. Best I can tell, it's been since about 1966. I found the zoning map that showed the general area being LC.
Darren, I can't hear anything Jamie's saying.
There weren't tax map parcels on there then, but, you know, the general swap was still.
Jamie said it basically 1966, and it was LC.
I guess, here, I'm reluctant to, you know, give up LC anywhere in town, because of course, that's important. But on the other hand, I also see the value of this. I see the value of a nice little parking and picnic area. You know, that's at least a plus for me. So,
All right, anybody else?
I'm open-minded on it also at this point. I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes either. But
Okay,
glass
fair
of
enough.
water.
All righty, so I think the board
haven't
is
really
open to the
given it much
proposal, but,
guidance.
you know, not willing to give a firm answer tonight.
Okay.
But it's certainly open to the proposal.
I'll go down and take another look at the area and try to get a little more feel for
If
it.
you'd like for me to show you around, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
As far as next steps, if I could ask, is it something the board wants to go out, take a look at the site and provide us with feedback, or would you like us to make a formal application? And how does the board feel if they do want us to make a formal application? Would you rather consider a plan development district or an adjustment to the mapping, or what are the board's thoughts on that?
Well, we don't have the ability to force you to do a parking lot, right, without a PDD. And, you know, I don't, that's the rub of it, is I don't like doing PDDs anymore. I'm PDD'd out after my first 8 years, after 10 or whatever it was. So, but that said, I don't know how else we get a legal obligation to build a parking lot.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess that might be more of a legal question on how that could possibly be incorporated into a zone change, or I don't know, that's a good question, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, but, you know, we can, you know, address that with our town attorney and everything and see,
Okay.
you know, whether that could be accomplished through a rezoning or, yeah, it seems to me that to get the benefit, it's the PDD process that provides for that to happen, not a rezoning.
Okay.
Can I just ask one last question? If, back at the map, but people coming and going from the development, do they have to cross the trail to get on Rule Road?
Oh, they would, yes. Yes.
Because that, you know, might be problematic.
I think there are crossings of the Zim Smith Trail in many different places, so I think much more major roads
Yeah.
in this way, so I think there's an avenue that we
Yeah,
can.
well, there definitely is one on East High
Oh,
Street,
that's true, yes. yeah.
like Curtis Lumber there.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, East
Yeah.
Line, yeah.
So it would have to have, there'd have to be some adequate, you know, that one has, or East Line.
East Line and Round Lake Road, and so there
Right.
are, yeah.
Yeah, the good thing here is that there's a fair number of homes, but not too many, so I think it's something that you could even do stop sign control on each side of
Right.
the trail. I don't think it would be that inconvenient for motorists to stop at the trail and then look both ways, make sure nobody's coming and then go. And likewise, stop signs on the trail as well.
Yeah, I would think there'd have to be the
Yeah.
lighted beacons like there is
Right.
at the East
Yeah.
Line Road and
All righty.
67.
Darren, if I could, I had just a closing, pretty much remark about this. While I feel for Mr. Crawford, I feel for Mr. Crawford with, you know, the loss he's had down there with his property and such, and I also understand from a safety standpoint that we'd like more in the way of lighting, more in the way of people being down there to police it, so to speak. I would caution that we use that as a driver, especially if we're looking at possibly changing the zoning of LC for anything. That's my biggest concern. we have other areas in the town that are back roads, whatever you want to call them, that people dump trash, they do other things as well. I would hate to throw in a development every time we have those areas, just for the sake of under safety or whatever you have. So I just think that we should be mindful of that rather than just rush to this because there is public benefit, I get that, but there's also public concern, I think, as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand. The only thing I would like to emphasize or add to that, again, is we have 10.36 acres that is flat and has utilities, is not wooded, is not constrained land. So I understand completely what you're saying, but in concert with that, we have an area that doesn't really need conservation, is a nice developable piece of property. And I think that perhaps maybe it wasn't looked at real close when that LC swath was more or less put through that particular area. So in concert with what you're saying, I do think that there are safety benefits to this, but that's not the primary emphasis that I'm trying to convey. At least it's definitely an added benefit, but the primary thing is that it's good buildable land that doesn't require conservation and was formerly occupied for 30 years as a use.
Sir, in answer to your question about, or your comment about this being a vehicle for other people to try and develop a piece of property, I can tell you that my family's afraid to go down there. I mean, I own the property. My wife and 2 daughters, they won't go down there unless I go with them. They're scared because they know what's going on. They hear me talking about it, and then in the advent of the September 26th sexual assault that was right there, I mean, that was the end for me. That's when I knew that I had to approach you here at the board and just let you know, it is a Wild West area down there. I can't emphasize that enough. There is not one single time that I go down there that I don't find evidence of somebody doing some kind of malicious activity, whether it's smashing the building that I just put some new drywall up on, or the windows, or they knock down the doors. They deal drugs down there. They smash bottles. There's racism. They're spray painting. I mean, it is really about as bad as you can consider a piece of property being. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are so many different entrances to the property. You've got the Zim Smith Trail that has hundreds of people going by my property every single day. And then you got the power lines in the back, and people, I wasn't aware of this, but people follow these power lines on their four-wheelers, and they come over
I'm going to have to ask you to bring your comments to, we have a long agenda tonight.
Okay,
We
I'm
really
sorry.
got to get
I'm-
moving,
I'm-
so.
I just wanted to make sure that you understood that
Okay.
there's a fear factor involved, and it's real. It's not an attempt to develop, it's an attempt to really make.
No, I wasn't
safe.
implying
Okay,
that.
we got that. All right. Anything else before we move on?
Just quickly, Scott, what vehicle are you going to be racing this weekend when the Speedway opens up?
I'm actually on vacation starting tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. We're catching a flight out, so I'm going to miss opening day, unfortunately.
Is your car ready? What
It's
do you-
ready, yes,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah, ready to fill the field. That's about it, really.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. The
Appreciate it.
board will
Thank you.
seriously consider this. Thank you so much. Okay, next item. Do we have any comments or announcement from town board members?
I have one thing I'd like to mention. Saturday turned out to be a decent day, and probably at least 70 kids participated in the socially distant and COVID protocoled Easter egg hunt. We did it at the Malta Community Park, and Barb did a great job planning an event that was safe, and fun was had by all. So,
But I noticed that you were taking some eggs, Cynthia, just in case you didn't think it was observed. I did in fact see that while I was there, so
not a one.
just for the record.
Thank you, Cynthia. Any other comments from town board members? Okay, just one real quick, just to remind everybody in Malta that we have the rubbish collection, the containers, the dumpsters will be placed at the complex here on June 5th and June 12th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Last year, a lot of our residents made use of it. We think it's a good program, and so the board during budget time put it into place again this year, and so we hope to see you then. Department heads, any comments or ideas from department heads? I mean, we have your reports, but anything else at this point?
I just have one. I broke my own rule about not talking into the microphone. That's why
Ah.
Tim couldn't hear. Stormwater, the annual
That doesn't
stormwater
sound like it's
report.
on. Is that on?
The annual
Okay.
stormwater report will be up online starting on the 7th, which I think is what, Wednesday? Wednesday, for public review and comment.
All righty. Thank you, Jamie. Anyone else? Okay, comments or questions from town residents? Ted? Ted, could you go up to the microphone so we? Okay.
My name is Ted Willett. I live on 358 Brownell. In discussion with about LC zoning, and I guess this would be a question to the board, or perhaps Jamie could help out. It doesn't preclude development. There are some things that are able to develop in the LC zone. Could the board refresh my memory?
I can't. Can you, Jamie?
Agriculture.
Yeah.
And in agriculture, that is all buildings, barns.
It can be buildings, yes.
So I would say to the gentleman there that you do have options. I don't think agriculture would be, at least what I picture as agriculture, would be something that would be of benefit to the neighborhood or to the local residents. So it might be one of these things, careful what you wish for. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Ted. Brendan, did you want to talk? I'm going to go through the room here first, and then we'll move to Zoom. I see there are several people with hands up, so we will definitely get to you.
Can you hear me? Everybody hear me okay? Good afternoon, board. Thank you very much. Very briefly, I'm Brendan Schutte, here representing an employee of Global Foundries, the director of their global real estate department. We have other folks from Global Foundries that are currently on the call as well. Greg Connors and some of our consultants are here. So again, very briefly, our company, through me, submitted a letter today with some questions and some items, and I believe the town board has received it. I've received a few comments back and forth, but just to reiterate, I'd like that to be made part of the record for this, for Skinnell's application. And more specifically, to one of the points that was raised in my letter from today, is that Global Foundries has a $15 billion investment in the Luther Forest Tech Park. It's my understanding that for consideration today from the town board is a potential to vote on whether or not to accept the current document that was put forth by Skinnell in order to scope their environmental process. Supervisor O'Connor, we went back and forth a bit today by email, wanted everybody to know that we are trying to review that document as quickly as we can, but the first part of that document only came to us after last Monday's board meeting. We've only had that for less than a week, and the second portion of that, with the all-important traffic portion of that scoping, only came to us Thursday afternoon. We believe, in order to be consistent with the town's past practices, that we be allowed as an interested party to make input into those documents. We have not been able to fully digest them and to get our consultants aligned in order to make that happen in such a short time frame. Again, the final document came across Thursday afternoon. It's a holiday weekend. It's only been a day or two. But again, we ask for, as set forth in my letter, for any vote that pertains to an accepting or of the scoping document put forth by Skinnell be postponed. We suggest for 30 days, give or take. I think there's a board meeting on May 3rd. We think that would be an appropriate period to allow Global Foundries and anybody else to give input to the town and to Skinnell with regards to the scoping of their seeker process. And again, wanted to reinforce that with you here today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Anyone else in the room want to address the board? Okay, I'm looking at the screen and I see the first one on my screen is Travis Feely. Travis?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to highlight a couple things that I was able to be a part of over the past couple weeks. The Malta Veterans Appreciation Program, which I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with, have been doing amazing work. and I came to the meeting a little late, so I apologize if this has already been spoken about, but currently working on a home for a veteran down in Malta Gardens. And every Saturday, 8:30, anybody that's available to provide labor, parts, money, food would be greatly appreciated. And then also this past weekend, unfortunately, I couldn't hang out with the Easter Bunny, but I was over on Dunning Street helping some folks out with a Rotary Club to pick up some trash, filled up several bags there. So a lot of good things going on in Malta, and I just want to make sure the board and the community was aware. Thank you.
Did you
Thanks.
guys find anything interesting?
So there is one thing that's fairly interesting. It was a bottle of Gatorade, not filled with Gatorade. So probably on a long trip, they decided to get rid of it. But that's probably that and a car bumper. I'd say that's the two most interesting things.
All righty, thank you very much, Travis. And yeah, the Veterans Program is dynamite, and we really appreciate all the volunteers, lending their working hands and hammers and everything else to that goal. Thank you very much. Bob Connor, you're the next one on my screen.
Yes, thank you, Darren. I just want to basically follow up on what I said last week about the proposed Ruley Road development. And I guess I heard Mr. Hammond and Mr. Willett talk earlier, and I think they raised valid concerns. I'm a regular user of that Zim Smith Trail. I've never seen any parking problems. The Shenandoah Park is just a very short distance away. There's no need for, in my view, for picnic areas. I suppose if the applicant was willing to sell the parking lot to the town, that might be useful, but.
You don't want to talk about the.
Kathy, all right, she's muted. Go ahead, Bob.
But I don't see any public benefit, and I do see substantial public loss if this development is allowed to go forward. That, first of all, when people talk about 10.3 acres is not constrained and it's buildable, I dispute that. It is constrained because it is zoned now land conservation. And it's zoned land conservation for various, in my mind, good reasons. That any development is going to increase runoff into the Bullston Creek. Every tree you chop down, every driveway you pave, every house you build is going to degrade the environment potentially, just as it will around Saratoga Lake or anywhere else. The more we develop in sensitive environmental areas, the worse off for the environment it's going to be. There's also, as I said last week, a huge aesthetic loss to users of the Zim Smith Trail, who are large, many of them, including me, are town residents. That there is now a beautiful view from the trail down the hill to the Bullston Creek over this lovely wild forest. And that's going to be destroyed to put up 11 houses. And that is going to be a loss for the people of the town of Malta. And the purpose of the zoning, the action of the zoning, is to benefit the people of the town of Malta. I am sorry about the applicant's situation, that the law enforcement problem, I mean, that's a real issue, but I don't see that we should address law enforcement problems through changing land conservation zoning. And I think it will diminish the credibility of this board and this government if land conservation doesn't mean anything. It's just something to be thrown aside when the owner of the property chooses to change it, even though he bought it knowing it was land conservation. And so it's not the equivalent of Hearn Road or other places where you have potential legal problems. And I really think it would be a huge mistake, and it would send a signal that Malta is open to bad development, to environmentally unsustainable development, and that the the protections that previous town boards and town governments have put in place are not really there, and or the town is just prepared to ignore them for what I regard as no good reason.
Okay. Thanks very much, Bob. I don't know, maybe the board, when it's thinking about this, will, want to get some input from the Oats Committee. But, maybe the members will consider that or something like it. Thank you very much, Bob. Kathy, you're the next one with the hands up. Kathy Eitzman.
Hello. Okay, so I think I have everything going now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so first off, with a different hat on, living on Round Lake Road, that beacon on the corner of the Bank and Hearthwood, Hearthwood, is out. And people were crossing, and the car going west actually zoomed around them to head on west. So although they had turned the beacon on the south side of the road, because it wasn't functioning on the north side of the road, people figured they didn't have to pay attention to the people in the road. So that needs to be fixed. I know that's a county thing, but Kevin is so good about that, Kevin. So maybe Kevin King can follow through on that for us. That would be awesome as residents down here. Then with the Malta Senior hat on, I want to say thank you. Mark Hammond was generous enough to offer a ride for a senior who just heard about us and wanted to come to our meeting. Unfortunately, she was ill this morning, but I did pigeonhole Mark into giving seniors a little synopsis of what's happening in Malta, which they appreciate very much. So thank you for that. We had 33 seniors listening how to stay senior strong, and it was a great presentation. So that's pretty much all that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Appreciate that. Okay, Dan Hubble. Dan, you're next up.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon. Earlier today, on behalf, as you know, I represent the High Point at Malta Homeowners Association. Earlier today, I forwarded a letter to you on behalf of them in regards to the vote that's happening tonight on the amendment to the town code, which would remove the exemption from the sidewalk maintenance. Last week, Supervisor O'Connor, you had mentioned the idea of creating a $100,000 fund, which would be given over the next 3 years to carry some of the costs for the ongoing maintenance and repairs that need to be done. I know that this issue's been talked about greatly. The one thing I wanted to highlight in my letter for the public here is what that offer would result in to the High Point community. Currently, right now, the High Point community has association fees of roughly $325 per year. Based on your offer, in which the town would cover $100,000 of the roughly $400,000 potential work that needs to be done out there, that would result in an increase of 130% to the association fees. It's about $250 per home per year. In the letter, I talk about the uniqueness of the High Point community, how it was created, the fact that the town received land donated to it for the community center that all residents benefit from. In a footnote in my letter, I highlight what the change in taxable value would be if the town was to follow through with the apparent agreement it made with the developer in the High Point community when the PDD was established. The cost there would be about $10.80 per year based on an assessed value of $360,000 home. This issue has been around for a while. It's been talked about repeatedly. I know it's been talked about probably more than you'll care to talk about here over the past year. But really, the concern here is what Councilperson Hartzell spoke about last week, that this really is unfortunately a situation that was created by the town, by prior town boards. And now to come up with a partial solution, the fear of High Point and its residents is that it will put them in a position that they'll never be able to recover from. And so in terms of the action that the board may take tonight, I really wanted to be able, and High Point really wanted to be able to quantify for you exactly what the economic impacts would be to its residents based on that action in the event that the $100,000 doesn't cover the cost, which we believe it will not.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Kelly. Kelly Winslow, you're next up. I'm not hearing you, Kelly, so I don't know if you're muted or what. All right, why don't you hold on, Kelly, and we're going to go with Brian Whitley now. Brian?
Thank you, Supervisor. And first of all, I want to start things off by confirming I did send an email to each individual member of the town board a couple of days ago. I just wanted to quickly ask and confirm whether you all received and were able to read that letter regarding the High Point sidewalk issue.
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. You obviously understand at this point my feelings on it. But again, in front of the town board, I want to reiterate my opposition to Supervisor O'Connor's proposal. I do not feel in the slightest that it's significant enough to address all the problems that are in place. And I sincerely hope that you do not go forward with that proposal. And I'll just leave it at that.
All righty. Thank you, Brian. Julian and Kurt, I don't know which one of you is on, but whoever wants to speak, you're next.
Hi, it's Julianne. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak, Supervisor O'Connor. I also sent an email earlier this week to you to share with the board, sharing my sentiments regarding the sidewalk issue. I'm a homeowner. My husband and I are homeowners here in High Point. And I think just to try to hit a couple of the bullet points in what I had sent, just to reiterate on that, I feel like we're being put in an unfair position with the decision that seems to be upon us, having come into this development, appreciating the modest HOA fees that afforded, a certain value to our homes and to some common spaces, never imagining the potential increase that's upon us. And, I know you could argue that everybody has the benefit of the use of the sidewalks, but, a little bit of hard data on my point indicated that, it's 93 out of the 150 residents actually have the sidewalks in front of their homes. In terms of direct day-to-day benefit of using them, whether it's kids on the sidewalks or people who need that kind of access. So, and there was a vote. I know it wasn't any kind of binding vote, but they were trying to take a pulse on the community to see how the residents felt. We were given the opportunity repeatedly to cast a ballot indicating how we felt about this issue. And two-thirds of the people, approximately two-thirds of the residents responded with a majority, not a vast majority, but still numerically a majority in favor of removal over what might result in a significant increase in our HOA fees. So all of that being said, if, I think some consideration should be given to what the masses have said.
All right. Thank you, Julian. Appreciate that. James Poitras.
Hi, Town Board. I appreciate you listening to me. I'm a resident of High Point. I'm also a board member of the HOA. I want to touch on a couple things I wrote down, and I'm not going to repeat a lot of stuff. I don't like beating a dead horse. First thing I like to say is making repairs to certain areas of the sidewalk is nothing more than a Band-Aid, because so far that's been what's discussed. And using asphalt again is a short-term fix, even if the entire system is replaced. since asphalt has a far shorter lifespan than concrete. I understand safety is important for some residents, but we have other avenues that can be taken to slow down the speed of traffic. I.e., there's plenty of places in here that could use a stop sign to slow down the highway speeds that we're seeing in a couple locations. Dan touched on the finances. High Point will never recover from having to replace these sidewalks going forward, especially now that they're owned by the town. And there's no question in that. They're in the town right away. The town took possession of them when they put the exemption in their new zoning code back in 2004. And to have them turn over sidewalks to us, which don't even meet state, federal, and local code, is kind of absurd, because you're putting the onus back on the HOA to make repairs that the town should have made while they were in possession and they own the sidewalks. Excuse me. I understand the town is also about protecting open spaces, and not to change the subject here, but they can find money to buy land to preserve open spaces so there's no development, but yet they can't find money to make repairs to the sidewalks that they currently own. And when you have a development built, you put a bond on that developer, so everything is done. And if nothing, the bond is not returned until that repairs are up to the planning board code when they did their PDD for the development. I don't understand how the town can require that of a developer, but yet not follow that same rule when they want to turn sidewalks over from the town to the High Point HOA. There's no way that High Point can actually recoup these costs ever. And I know of 2 or 3 people have already stated, if these sidewalks stay in the current conditions, they will sell their houses, because they don't want to stay if they're going to cost them $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year in association dues. I respectfully ask the board to consider the effects of their actions if they choose to make minimal steps to address the sidewalk issue and then turning them over to the HOA still in dire need of future repairs. That, to me, is not acting in good faith towards the residents of the community of Malta and Hall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. If the people commenting in public comment could, try to make their comments quick. We do have a long agenda tonight. So that being said, Anthony, you're the next one up. Anthony Pino. You're muted, Anthony.
Sorry about that. You've had a couple of emails on my position. I'm a homeowner here in High Point, of course, and I do have a sidewalk in front of my home. I feel that you're down to 2 options. Nothing in the middle will suffice for either majority of the residents here. You need to repair them to the appropriate standard where they're durable and will be long lasting, or take them out. I also ask you to remind you that when the PDD was signed and ratified, the options that were leveraged by the town within that, also part of that PDD are 4 commercial properties that include 1 Bayberry, 2 Bayberry, 26 Rock Rose, and 30 Rock Rose. Those properties are not being discussed or mentioned. Obviously, one of those is the community center. So any assessments that you plan to potentially put in your decisioning must include all of those properties that were part of that PDD, including the town itself, the commercial property across the street from the community center, and the 2 commercial properties on Rock Rose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Jamie, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Do you? No. Okay. There are no other comments. We'll move to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Darren, can I just respond to Kathy Eitzman?
Sure, go ahead, Kevin.
Kathy Eitzman had a question about the beacons up at Round Lake Road, and I believe Roger's department has already got the parts numbers and so forth to order those, so it's in as far as I know, it's in process. I will check on it and see where it stands, but they're aware of it. I think I've seen that they removed the top pole structure isn't even on the street anymore, so I think it's back in the highway garage.
Okay.
So it's on their agenda to take care of.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Alrighty, the next item on our agenda tonight is an ambulance district update. I think the town board has discussed this many times and just gone back and forth. I think the town is one of the only towns, perhaps the only town without an ambulance district in the county. And so there's been a request by our EMS company to establish an ambulance district. The town board is considering that, and we've been dealing with a number of legal issues that go forward with it. One being, whether if the board members want to refer this out for a vote, ordered by the town board as opposed to based on a petition from a number of residents. The question is, whether in Article 12A it is a vote voted on by the property owners, or whether it is a vote voted on by the residents, the actual voters in the town. So it's an interesting question. Some towns have gone both ways. In my opinion, I think that the law is invalid under the Constitution to the extent it prohibits some town residents from voting on a matter that involves the entire town, such as an ambulance district was, since ambulance is there for all the residents of the town, not necessarily non-resident property owners. So in my opinion, to the extent Article 12A requires a vote only by property owners to the exclusion of some residents, it's violative of the state and federal constitution, and I think there's support for that position. So if the town board chooses to adopt the idea and send it out for a vote, then my recommendation would be putting it on the vote on November 2nd in the general election for the residents. That being said, we're looking at schedules. Our first item would be to file the map plan and report. That's been comprised. We're waiting to hear from the village as to whether the village is going to opt in or opt out of a proposed district if it happens. And I think, and I know Gary's on the line, and I think the village trustees are meeting on Wednesday. And so hopefully we'll be able to establish that one way or the other. And by the way, Round Lake, we hope you join us if we go this direction. We would file the map plan and report. We'd publish notice of the public hearing. We'd have the public hearing perhaps in our May agenda meeting and at the end of May. If the public hearing persuades the board to pass it, then we could adopt a resolution and setting a referendum in June. So that is a tentative schedule at least, and that is the update on the ambulance district.
Darren, question, please?
Sure.
I printed out, but really didn't have a chance to look at the document you circulated most recently in the last several days. Is this, are there changes here? It's been so long since I looked at a working document for the map plan and report. Is this basically substantially what we've previously seen, or what if anything is different in this document we received last week?
Last week? Oh, different from a long time ago, you mean?
Yeah, we received this document by email late last week.
Okay, it's the numbers, basically.
The numbers
The
have
numbers
changed
and-
since the last version. Otherwise, it's the same document.
The differences between Round Lake joining and Round Lake not joining, we have, different scenarios with those two.
Addressed in this document.
And that's still addressed in this document, I think, right, Kevin?
And there's some other changes. Not obviously the numbers, the other one was prepared in 2018? So some of those numbers have changed. We don't have all the recommendations because they addressed most of those.
Right, so going through this, we updated all the tables to reflect the current year information. The last report was done in probably 2018 data.
Okay.
We've got 2 more years of data in this report. All the comparisons are brought up to speed in current. And there was discussions between the Malta Ambulance Board, members of the Malta Ambulance Board, members of the town board, to come up with.
Darren, can we have Kevin come to the microphone if he's going to be speaking?
Sorry, my paper turned it off, Tim. So we updated the report for the for 2019, 2020 data. Members of the town board, a couple members of the town board, a couple members of the Malta Ambulance Corps, along with their executive director, discussed current operations, anticipated operations, effect of the COVID pandemic, and changes in the healthcare industry. And tentatively within this draft report, a number was put forth of $470,000, which would be for 2022, which would be the first year that the district would be in place. Also proposing more or less maybe a 3-year agreement in which 2023 would be at 470, and then in 2024 the number would drop down to roughly $410,000, because at the end of 2023 the mortgage of the ambulance corps on their building is repaid. So therefore we brought down the dollar amount. The mortgage is roughly 120, but at that point in time you're going to start to invest money into a building reserve to start to facilitate monies for future repairs. That was the thought. And then we go through and we base it upon the 2020 final assessment roll. The 2021 roll is not complete. These numbers would get changed once that report is, once that roll is finalized. Currently on the $470,000, an assessed value house of $250,000 would have ambulance district tentative tax of $44.58.
Thanks very much.
And then the financial information of the Corps for the last 3 years is presented in the report as well.
Darren, to your point, if we are going to go forward, I favor, as you've suggested, that the board on its own motion vote to put it on the ballot for the voters to decide.
Okay.
That's one man's point of view.
Is that the sense of other board members?
It is mine.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
When is this document available to the public? Tonight?
As
No?
soon as we file it, as soon as the board decides to file it, which we have tentatively on the agenda for May 3rd.
Okay.
All right, that's the ambulance district. Okay, next item on the agenda is Hearn Road rezoning, and we'll just give ourselves a moment here. All righty. Okay, we have had a protest filed by 3 neighbors of the property at 12 Hearn Road. And that protest is under Section 265 of the town law. That section requires a vote of 4 members of the town board as opposed to a simple majority of 3 if it's signed by 20% of the adjacent properties within 100 feet of the property that is being rezoned. So we have, our lawyers who have advised us about the impact of that and what it means from a legal point of view. And the owners have submitted a survey and an analysis by Environmental Design Partnership, stating that that under 265, the 20% limit is not reached. That is the determination of the information that's been given to us by the surveyor. And so I think the first order of business from the town is to decide, are we moving forward with this with that vote? If the board is comfortable with what it's been provided for today, we can move forward with the vote. And if the board wants to, subject it to any further review, I think we could subject it to verification by building and planning and our town engineers. So,
Darren, I'm exactly with you on that point. I mean, I saw this at like 5:15 this afternoon, I think, and it is very close. It's 21 hundredths of about 0.2 of an acre, would trigger the 20%. And under that circumstance in particular, I think we owe it to the petitioners to have our own counsel and engineer, if necessary, make the, calculation to determine whether the 20% is achieved.
I'd like to hear from Leah and Steve as to whether or not they think the numbers are valid.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we took a look at the we took a look at the petition. The petition on its face asserts that the owners, and there are 3 properties with 6 owners, that the owners make up 20%, but it's really only that statement. There's no data included in the petition that would help a reader know for sure whether those petitioners make up the necessary 20% or more of adjacent property owners. The owner of the property went a step further and over the weekend had their surveyor provide what materials you've just been provided with. So obviously, the timing situation we all have here is not as a result of anyone dragging their feet. It's just, the way it all happens. We've taken a look at relevant law, including opinions of the Attorney General that have been issued over the past several decades. We've taken a look at the petition itself, and we've taken a look at the materials provided. We've issued you a memorandum that kind of outlines what we believe the proper methodology is, but we're not in a position to tell you what the calculation comes out to. That's really not our area. We can tell you that in reviewing the materials that the owner provided, it certainly appears that while close, we're under the 20% threshold. From our perspective, no matter how close you get to 20%, if you're under 20%, there's no supermajority requirement. From our perspective, it does appear that we don't have a valid protest petition, but obviously that, those are objective facts. We're looking at exactly what you're looking at. We know nothing more than the calculation that EDP has provided to us. It does appear that it's based upon a survey, which means from our perspective, we think a survey is the most accurate means of calculating these figures. If the town board wishes to provide planning staff an opportunity for further review, certainly you can do so. But we doubt that planning staff, and please, Jamie, cut me off if you disagree, but we doubt that given the formalities involved in a survey and the materials provided by EDP, that our planning staff will really be in a position to contradict a surveyor or engineer's opinions as to the area of land involved.
That said, we have Chazen that we pay regularly for this type of work. Why wouldn't we have them independently make the calculation?
Councilman Hotzer, do you mean review the materials provided, or do you mean undertake a survey of its own out on the property?
Not necessarily, sir. This is this is significant. I think we as a town need to make our own independent evaluation as to whether the statute is satisfied. I'm very hesitant to take the word of somebody who's paid by the property owner. We're supposed to be objective in our analysis, our conclusions. We have the capability to do the same sort of evaluation that they did. They certainly didn't go out and survey property over the weekend, right? They didn't survey the 3 property owners' parcels to make a calculation. Some sort of reasonable, independent inquiry to evaluate whether the 20% has been achieved. That's what I'm comfortable with.
Darren, I'm comfortable relying on the professional guidance of our attorneys and staff here and proceeding with the option 1 that's been proposed.
Steve, if we proceed with option 1, which is the blue line, the horizontal line, can we make the resolution subject to verification by our building and planning department in consultation with our town engineer?
Darren, I think you certainly could do that. I think the review of the case law would authorize that.
and that would fulfill the town's obligation to address the sufficiency of the 20% test that we're talking about. And I think Leo.
So with that qualifier, I would move option 1, the resolution, and request a second.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion on the motion, and this motion is to adopt option 1, which is the blue line, the horizontal line. And added to that would be that this resolution is subject to verification by the Town of Malta Building and Planning Department in consultation with the Town of Malta engineers.
And if it's determined that it is 20%, where does that leave us?
Then the town board revisits this issue, moves to the other option that'll be before the board.
So if the board adopts this by, let's say, a 3-5 vote, and it's determined that the 20% is achieved, where does that leave us?
Then the resolution fails.
Okay, and that determination of whether the 20% is achieved or not is going to happen when, and how's that determination going to be finalized?
It would be verified by our building and planning department, and, we'd have to get basically the verification by the engineers, Shazen.
I oppose doing it this way. I think in fairness, we ought to know ahead of time what the vote requirement is before we vote on something. But with that said, I move to amend the local law to replace the designation of C7 with R8 and respectfully request a second.
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion to amend. Okay, I mean, for reasons that we've discussed many, many times when the board has addressed this issue, I oppose this motion to amend because I think that the rezoning something commercial to entirely residential is too dramatic a change. I think that, the modification to zone the majority of this property as land conservation, to keep it as land conservation, mixed with a portion of it being commercial, is in conformity with, the town's vision for that area. And even though it obviously has some problems, I think those problems can be ironed out at the planning board level if they come to. So I oppose this motion to amend.
I agree.
I agree. I oppose also.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No?
Nay.
No.
Okay, Jen, that motion to amend fails by the 3-2 vote. Okay, we're back onto the original motion, which is to adopt the horizontal blue line subject to verification by the Building and Planning Department and the Town of Malta engineers. Any other discussion on the primary motion?
Yes, please.
John?
I move to amend the local law to move the line dividing the C7 from the LC so that it runs parallel north to south, 500 feet distant from the US 9 margin, and respectfully request a second.
Second.
Discussion?
I don't understand. Are you going back to the diagonal line or?
Nope, 500-foot line set back from Route 9, just like we have all the way up and down Route 9. 500 feet back is commercial to be consistent with our zoning practice throughout that commercial corridor. The first 500 feet back from Route 9 would be commercial, C7. The residue in the back would be land conservation.
All right, I oppose that motion to amend, and also because I don't think it is in conformity with the natural contours of the land. There's a lot of that 500 feet is in a zone around the creek, et cetera, that is inappropriate for commercial. I believe that the horizontal line is a more appropriate line.
I agree.
I agree.
Any other discussion on John's second motion to amend? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay?
Nay.
No.
Jen, did you get that? Okay, that motion to amend fails. We're back to the primary motion. Any other discussion on that motion?
Supervisor O'Connor. I apologize for interrupting. I just didn't want to miss my opportunity. I think that the board previously considered SECRA review when it was considering a diagonal line. We would recommend that SECRA review be conducted before the board takes action on the proposed local law this evening. Now, if the answers to the questions are all the same that the board previously concluded during a related review effort, you know, there might not be a need to go through each of the questions and answer each of those questions. But we would recommend that the board address SECRA in some way, either going through the EAF form and answering the questions in part 2, or acknowledging for the record that the answers previously given apply equally to this proposed line as they did to the diagonal line.
Thank you, Leah. And while I believe that the answers to the first one definitely apply to the same way, I think it's probably better practice to go through it. So first, let me just summarize some of the points made in the resolution. You know, that this doesn't exceed the thresholds of the original supplemental GEIS. You know, the advice we've gotten is that there is no further SECRA review necessary. Notwithstanding that, I think the board has decided to, you know, just out of an excess of caution perhaps, move forward, consider this as in accordance with type 1 procedures and go along with that with part 2 of the EAF. The future development on the property is purely speculative at this point. We have no basis to evaluate a certain structure or proposal. So this is limited to rezoning. You know, the idea is that this action by the board wouldn't be less protective of the environment. There are no other agencies involved. This has been referred to the Saratoga County Planning Board. They've responded that in the same way, no matter where the actual line is placed. And so with those kind of ideas, you know, what we can do is go through the part 2 of the environmental assessment form. Now, I apologize for, you know, what might be boring, but and we've gone through these items before, but why don't we just do it again just to make sure and be cautious.
Is this in front of us, Darren? Okay, there it is. Okay.
Number 1, the impact on land. You know, again, as we've discussed several times in the past, you know, the proposed action, you know, does not involve any construction. So there's nothing other than speculation that the board could refer to. That's item 1. Impact on geological features, you know, the same answer. Impacts on surface water, again, you know, this land is going to be the same right now after the board decides this motion, if it approves it, as it is right now. Number 4 is impact on groundwater, you know, the same result. Impact on flooding, the same result. Impacts on air, same. Plants and animals, again, since there isn't any specific proposal before the board, I'm not seeing any impact on that. Or number 8, agricultural resources. Aesthetic resources, the same answer. Impact on historic or archaeological resources, since there is no specific item before us. Same answer. Impact on open space and recreation, same answer. I don't think critical environmental areas are involved, and if so, there's not an impact on them. Again, since there's no proposal before the board, the impact on transportation is a no. Same with impact.
I respectfully disagree with that.
Okay. Understood. Impact on energy, my view is the same, not an impact. Impact on noise, odor, and light, same result. Impact on human health, the same result, that there is no impact. Consistency with community plans, you know, the resolution talks about that. We think it is consistent with a comprehensive plan. This property was zoned entirely commercial for a long time. So this is certainly consistent with the comprehensive plan, especially as updated in 2016 with the North Commercial Corridor. My sense is that this horizontal blue line strikes the proper balance between land conservation and, observing, the rights of the property owners, et cetera, and the character of the area in number 18. So
I respectfully disagree. This is going to blow, this is going to blow a major hole in the landscape, let's not kid ourselves, of Malta Ridge. Let's be honest. Whatever is built there is going to blow a major hole in the side of that hill.
And that hole is going to magnify the drainage issue that is on. It happens over and over. The whole drainage coming from that hill ends up down at Silver at the H, and I have several actual photographs of houses being flooded out, and to only do something else worse is going to increase the problem. We have never addressed it yet. We have to do something.
thank you, Craig and John. Any other discussion on this motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Jen, did you get that? It passes by a 3-2 vote, and that's with the addition, at the end of the resolution. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is High Point. And let's give it a moment to get Mark back up here. Alrighty, just preliminarily on these two motions to, adopt the amendment to Chapter 139 and to approve the High Point Sidewalk project. I look at these two resolutions together. I don't think one can or should be passed without the other one being passed, and so my votes on these will be conditioned on that, basically. That being said, the first item is to adopt the amendment to Chapter 139. You want to discuss that before, or you want to make a motion? Does somebody want to move that?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I think, as I've said before, there are no good options here. We have a bunch of bad options, unfortunately, and we've been put into a very, very difficult position. The homeowners have been put into a very difficult position. I don't like this. This is not what I would like to have happen, but we really have been put in a terrible position here, and I wish there was a clear and convincing consensus from the neighborhood in one direction or the other. But unfortunately, this, as I said before, I think is the best bad option we have available to us at this time.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I agree. This is a very difficult situation. But it's something that I think the town has to resolve after a long, long, long time of considering it and considering all input and positions on all sides of the equation. Any other discussion?
If I may, I spent some time today on this beautiful day walking around High Point, actually. Specifically, I walked all the trails in Thistle. There were a lot of people out. Kids were off from school, so it was, a lot of kids out playing and parents, watching them. So I took the time to speak to people. Overwhelmingly, most of them were concerned because they had heard the removal option. And once I told them that, that it's our intention to actually repair some of the critical parts and make them ADA compliant, they were mostly relieved. So I myself am committed to that, that we're actually going to make repairs to make them safe. I agree, while it's a difficult situation, I think that having it be the only neighborhood in the entire town of Malta where the town is responsible for the sidewalks creates an inequity. The other thing I heard from several people, someone else mentioned, and I don't remember who, that particularly on the streets that go through Bayberry and Thistle, where other streets come in, it could slow the traffic down to have some stop signs. So, you know, I don't know if that's something we can explore. I don't know what has to be done to make that happen, but I can see how that would at least help alleviate some of the traffic issues.
You'll forgive me because I'm old, right? So I've been around a lot. And as a traffic engineer, of which we have one in our room here, will tell you that if you install traffic signs in locations that are not consistent with the manual uniform traffic devices and accepted engineering practices, you actually create liability. So whenever you do install a sign, you want to make sure that you have an engineer recommending that you do it. Otherwise, you actually can increase liability to the town. It won't surprise anybody in this room that occasionally I found myself in life facing a big mess, one of which was my decision to go to law school. And the way I was raised is that when you're in that situation, you do what you have to do to fix it. You don't slough it off. And I've created several of my own messes in recent years even. And when I found myself in that situation, I didn't like it. I lost sleep over it, but I took care of it. And I think that's what the town should do in this situation as well. And we're not. We're just dumping it off, dumping a problem that we created off on the homeowners because we have the power to do it. And that's just not how I was raised.
All right.
I
Any
don't
other
really feel
discussion?
like we're doing that, John. I mean, we're making an effort, and I'm committed to making the effort to, to make repairs. Most of them are not in that bad a condition. They're safe. And simply because they're asphalt, I don't think that makes them less than, than concrete. And now we're expecting concrete, but at the time we didn't, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. An asphalt walkway where, 200 pounds of a person are walking on it and bicycles are riding on it and not dump trucks or cars or anything like that. I don't know that they're subject to the same standards or should be in terms of subbase, et cetera, as roadways. We have other asphalt sidewalks in the town. Foxglove is one. There are others. They seem perfectly fine. I don't see why this asphalt sidewalk can't be, put in a safe condition by the town now. I think that's possible. And for the audience, we're not in a public hearing section right now, so this is just town board discussion. So yeah, I'm in favor of this motion, even though I believe it's a very difficult situation, and I emphasize that I'm in favor of this motion because I'm also in favor of the next motion to devote money to put these sidewalks into, acceptable condition. That doesn't include concrete, but would be to put them in acceptable condition.
If I can just make one other observation, I think when this process is done and we've actually done the repairs, I would like to see us investigate the possibility, prepare a map plan and pool report, and investigate the possibility of a sidewalk district for the neighborhood. I think they can be maintained probably more efficiently that way, and then it wouldn't be, the HOA tacking an extra $200 on top of the already expensive HOA
no.
fees.
Sorry. Having walked it often, the problem isn't the asphalt. The problem is the roots from the trees that we planted, and they're starting to heave the asphalt. That asphalt can last a long time. There's no question about it. So to take the trees out, the roots out, the asphalt, replace it with concrete, I don't think is a fair answer. It should end up as asphalt as they bought the house and agreed upon. Thank you.
I agree with that. Any other comments before we take a vote on this motion? Discussion being ended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Okay, Jen, do you have that? I think that was 4-1. Motion carries. The next item is the paired up resolution for High Point walkway repairs to make the town responsible for designating a sum of money. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. One of the items that, I just throw out to the board for discussion on is whether it wants to put a little bit more money on this than the 100,000, at least to, accommodate a little bit more. One of the items talked around is whether it might be increased to 125,000 to just kind of make sure that, our engineers and workers can get this in a safe and acceptable condition. I don't know, how does the board feel about that?
I'm
Kevin?
fine with that. Most important thing is getting it done correctly,
Yeah, does Kevin think we can, scrape that together? Then yes, I'm in support of that too.
I'd like to see it be 400,000.
Okay, understood.
So based on your recommendation, Mr. Supervisor, I would move that the resolution be amended to a sum not to exceed $125,000 in the resolved paragraph, and request a second.
Second.
Discussion on the motion to amend. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Back to the discussion of the main motion as amended with 125K as opposed to 100K. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. The next item on the agenda tonight is the PDD proposed amendment by Scannell. We have a draft scoping document and a resolution that requires the preparation of a draft supplemental environmental impact statement. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, please.
John?
This process, folks, in no way resembles what we went through with Global Foundries. It's being rushed and it's nowhere near as thorough. And that really is a shame, because at the end of the Global Foundries process, we had a great partner and we had an unprecedented investment in our community of $15.2 or $15 billion and 3,000 jobs. They didn't rush us. We sat through meeting after meeting after meeting. They made sure we were comfortable. They gave us straight answers. They didn't hide the ball. They stepped up, and when we requested something or required something, they satisfied it. And we would meet as often as needed to keep that process going forward. This is nothing like that. And I'm very uncomfortable to the point where I just cannot, I've spent hours and hours reading this stuff, sending detailed written comments back, most of which has been ignored. Comments that in the last process would have all been responded to, so the whole board could have gotten satisfied with their questions and concerns. None of that is going on so far. And in view of that, I am not able to support this project until the questions that I keep asking and concerns I keep raising and mistakes I keep pointing out are addressed. I'm just not going to support it. This is a difficult spot. We have to create a future for the tech campus. I guess we're lucky to have this problem in that we've got potentially 2 paths forward. But having that option doesn't mean that we can just throw caution to the wind and not get serious questions answered about what this is really going to mean for our community. And we're still in, I don't know how many versions of the PDD language, the development fee language is highlighted still, as if that's still not, you know, you're keeping your options open, that you're not going to have to pay what Global Foundries paid. The investment in having a good faith relationship, a partnership like we had with Global Foundries and have, is not there. So I'll oppose this resolution. I mean, I had a list of specific questions on the scope that I emailed out. You know, I'd be glad to hear answers to these. The first couple on traffic, you know, I don't understand how the traffic study relates to development in NYSERDA, because Global Foundries is now looking at NYSERDA as the location of its build. I'm concerned about making the 2 pods that are left after this PDD amendment essentially worthless, because there'll be no traffic capacity to support any activity on their site. The aesthetics and lighting, the scope as it now reads calls for an assessment strictly at the property boundary. I think we need to look at light impacts off, you know, flowing off the site as well. The noise scope language, when you read it in connection with the PDD revision, to me it looks like it's going to be a self-determining process, that whatever noise they make is what noise is going to make, and that's going to be our regulation. We're not setting some kind of ambient noise standard that we're going to know in advance is going to be what the regulation is going to be. Archaeological and cultural, we have a letter from our town historian this afternoon. I believe that needs to be considered. Recreational resources, you know, when I ask a question about whether there's trails on a particular part of the area being developed, and instead of getting a real answer, I get well, there's no official trail. Well, I think, you know, what that tells me is there's a trail on there and people are using it, but you just won't give me a straight answer. And the reasonable alternatives, the rest of the town board, you know, heard from me over the weekend or late last week. I think it's not responsible to have a single reasonable alternative of a 10% reduction when you're looking at an increase in the total build of 233% over what's allowed now. This is not rezoning to allow warehouse use. This is rezoning to allow a mega warehouse in the middle of a tech campus. This is 233% of the buildable capacity that's now allowed is what the developer wants. And I think it's not responsible to not consider smaller alternatives than 233% or 210%. I think a 10% reduction down to 3,150,000, when you got 1.5 as the current build in there, that's not a fair look at the reasonable alternatives that I think SEQA requires or that we owe to our town residents. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you.
I got something to say also. There is no way that I'm going to support this tonight. We got to take a step back and we got to really look at this carefully. And as John has stated, we haven't done that. I don't know what the big hurry is to get this done so soon. It's a big, major decision for this town. And whatever we do on it is going to reflect in this town for years. And we better get it right. And we also got to give Global the respect to evaluate the draft. ahead of time and to comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig and John. Okay, I mean, this is certainly not the end of the town board's examination of this whole issue. It's not even close to ruling, passing on the application for an amendment. I see this resolution as furthering the search for information, specifically on the traffic. I mean, we've increased the scope to require a full traffic impact study. You know, that's going to give us a lot of information as to the feasibility of this, both with and without Global Foundries 8.2. So we want to make sure that the door, as I've stated before, to 8.2 remains firmly open. And I see this scoping document and resolution as, you know, furthering the goal of getting the town board the information that it's going to need to resolve this. I think it's, I think it's fine to move forward with this now. I'm certainly interested in hearing what Global Foundries has to say whenever it, you know, it can provide us, you know, specific information as to the categories of things that it doesn't like, why it doesn't like it, what impact it's going to have on Global Foundries, because we have, you know, been in a great partnership with Global Foundries over the years, and we absolutely want that to remain. So I definitely want to hear all the input from Global Foundries, but I don't see a problem with moving forward now to get the information as to the impact on traffic, which I believe is foremost in the minds of our residents in Malta as to what impact this is going to have. So that's why I'm in favor of this motion.
As I understand it, if there are two ways we can proceed in this. Either we can adopt this scoping document on our own, or we can open it up to the public if we say we're going to wait the 30 days and, you know, give Global Foundries the time, then that means all of the interested parties will participate in the scoping document. So two ways to do it. I do see some value in that. But I know that this was developed by, you know, our town engineers and our planning staff and I, you know, obviously I'm just a layperson, but it, you know, it's basically, these are the questions that we need answered. And the fact that John hasn't necessarily gotten his answers, I'm assuming that those, maybe I'm wrong, but that those answers will come with this environmental impact statement.
That's not correct. I mean, many of them really aren't within the scope of the EIS. And the problem, Cynthia, is that we keep getting revised PDF, or excuse me, revised PDD language. Some of it is I don't understand, and I read the law for a living, and I've asked questions that I don't get answers to. And like I said, when we did this with Global Foundries, this is this is several times for me, questions were asked. The entire town board got their questions answered. This, like Craig said, this is transformative for the town. You know, I feel a particularly heightened sense of responsibility myself to read all this stuff, to read it twice, to sit down and carefully ask questions about the details. When the developer gives me a chart that supposedly describes all of the changes they made in their last changed version of the PDD, and I go through it and I find 8 examples, which I've listed for the entire town board, of where they didn't include a description on their chart that they changed something and the reason for it. To me, that's illustrative that it's particularly important that we slow down, take our time, and look at all the details very carefully. And we're not doing that. We're just not.
If I can finish my remarks, John?
Yeah, go ahead, Cynthia.
First of all, it's key. I do not want this process to be rushed. It's important that we maintain our relationship with Global Foundries, and I, for one, don't want to rush this. But with this particular document, I guess what I want to ask is, are our staff and our consultants comfortable with the scope that we've developed?
Stu?
Thanks. Stuart Messinger, Shays and Companies. You're right, John, we're moving pretty quickly. I think that last Monday, the board asked us to revise the scope to include a traffic study for this meeting. So we worked back and forth with the applicant, and I think we got that to you on Thursday afternoon, so that's not a lot of time. Got some comments from John, very specific comments about the scope this afternoon. I think some of them are worth discussing. I think some of John's comments are fairly easily addressed. He's asked for some specific changes to the scope. For example, the inclusion of another alternative. So I think, that's worthy of consideration. I think Cynthia perfectly summarized the choice that you have, which is, I guess there's actually a third choice, a sub-choice. So the choices are adopt the scope as it is tonight. I think it addresses, or at least in the secret process, would address the issues John's raised. I mean, I think it covers construction traffic. I think at the end of the day, if you'll recall the memo I sent you discussing traffic, the 2018 Creighton Manning memo set forth what's left in capacity in the tech park, and you'd get that out of this. With respect to lighting, the standard is typically at the property line. So if you don't have glare at the property line, you wouldn't expect to have glare past that. I read the noise amendment that they're making to say that they don't have to monitor, but that they have to comply with the prior set of regulations. So I think
the language, I don't think bears that out, but I could be misreading it.
And that's why you're right. We're doing this, fairly quickly without studying it in detail together. But we read it slightly differently. I think with respect to the archaeological and cultural, I don't think there's an issue there. I think with recreational, I think it's perfectly easy to address that. You've asked for, I think the smaller alternative is substantive, a substantive comment. The way we try to write the scope with respect to the alternatives is to have the traffic study potentially back into an amount of development that doesn't blow up the network. And so we added an alternative that does that, but that's a little bit different.
With
than
that,
what you suggested.
Stu, if you do that, aren't you going to have to go back into each of the other impact areas? If you identify an alternative that doesn't blow up the traffic capacity, aren't you going to have to go circle back through all of the other impacts and potentially reevaluate them as well?
It's hard for me to see where there are significant impacts for this set of zoning amendments other than traffic. Noise, but that's measurable and you can solve it. Lighting, I think it's really a site plan issue at the end of the day. I think this is about traffic.
Isn't the, the seeker scope and the PDD revisions don't live, independent existences. They're tied to one another, right? So the evaluation that you're going to conduct in seeker is a function of the PDD language that is under consideration, right?
Correct.
So, the question that we should be asking ourselves is all this PDD language that's in the latest draft that we got on the 29th acceptable to all of us? Because that's what's reflected there is going to drive the assumptions which drive the impact analysis.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I think that's your decision as to whether the proposed legislation is right to move forward. To finish my thought about the councilwoman's comments, I think you have three choices. You can adopt the scope as it's been presented tonight. You can decide to engage in a public scoping process as requested by Global, and I think as John is suggesting. And the third choice, I suppose, would be we could amend this to delay John's comments, to address John's comments, and then bring it back to you. Those are the three I can think of.
Do you think, Stu, that there's, I could accept that option, that if there are other comments that you think John's made comments that have validity, then I could accept that, so. Again, like John, I don't want to rush this process, and I don't think anybody's well-served by rushing the process. But I also agree, that the single biggest, the elephant in the room is the traffic.
Right.
I
And-
don't
and
disagree
the-
with that, but that doesn't mean that the rest of it doesn't matter. Because
Right.
there's a lot of details in,
Agreed. Yeah.
in here that will affect what this project is if it happens. A big one for me, the 400-foot versus 250-foot buffer. There's one for me. And you can go through, I mean, I've made all my thoughts known. Maybe people will read them or not, I've done my job.
I read them.
Okay, yeah, so, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that cares about this stuff. If that's the case, the board can proceed and, I'll chime in once in a while.
Okay, I totally reject that comment that you're the only one who cares about this stuff. That's completely uncalled for and false.
No, I said, I
okay?
don't know if I am.
Oh, John, we know
I
what
have
that-
an
we know what
issue
that
on the.
Wait a minute, wait. I'm going to recognize Tim. He hasn't had a chance to talk on this. So, Tim, did you want to address the issue?
Yeah, I think it's important that we move forward with this scoping document, because the biggest issue with this project, as we all know, is traffic. And the better that we can have clear, informed data on traffic to properly assess this project, the better. And to suggest that somehow this process is being rushed or fast-tracked is frankly false. I mean, we're 6 months into this project review. We're 6 months in. The first time we had a presentation on this was in November of 2020. We're all being as dutiful and thoughtful as possible with this and reviewing the information as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I don't think that it's fair to characterize the applicant as trying to, hide information or be less than forthcoming. Every question that I have asked, I feel confident has been addressed. I feel that the questions that have been asked have been answered. This is not approving the project tonight. This is approving a scoping document so that we can move forward and we get the appropriate information we need to make an informed decision for our residents. And that's what we should be doing in a responsible manner this evening.
All I can tell you is that, I've listed all these questions. I don't have answers to a lot of them yet. I haven't seen a list of questions from anyone else. I don't know. I feel like I'm out here, on my own. I don't hear a discussion about issues that I'm raising. Like, is everybody in agreement with the 400-foot versus 250-foot buffer? We don't talk about it. We don't talk about any of these concerns. So, anyways, you have a vote on the scope. At this point, I wouldn't support it tonight. I think the request, to allow some further look at the scope until our meeting in May is a reasonable request, and that's what I'm comfortable with.
I'm not going to support it either. I have an issue on the Rocket site, and that has to be addressed. I feel it is happening too fast, and we got to get more of a public input on this also. I have gotten some, and that's how I'm voting tonight.
I guess I didn't get really a definitive answer to my question. Are consultants and our staff comfortable with the scoping document? Or do you think, I mean, you arguably said it was rushed. Do you feel like you would be more comfortable with the document given the extra time?
Honestly, I don't think that it would change significantly.
Okay.
As I say, the important thing here is the traffic. We modeled the scope exactly what we did in 8.2. It's
Okay.
the same scope. I understand John's concerns. That's up to you folks. I understand what Global is saying about wanting time to look at it. But to directly answer your question, the scope, there's some differences in counting and so on, which if we had to go into it, I'd ask Tom to do it. But it's the same traffic scope as you previously approved, and that's what's appropriate here. The whole idea here, remember, initially was the applicant wanted to just compare their traffic with prior thresholds, and when we pulled all the findings and frankly stepped out the door and looked around at what's happened over the years, we need a new traffic study.
Yeah.
And we needed to do two things. We needed to look at this project if there is no 8.2, and we need to look at this project if 8.2 and this project, and this rezoning happens and the resulting project is built. That's a lot of traffic, and we're gonna have to see what it says. But I think the scope will get you the information you need to address that. If we don't do any further amendments and you adopt the scope tonight, I think that all of John's comments will be addressed in the process, because they can always be addressed as part of the comment period.
Just so we're clear, though, about this point, and that is that the intention, if this goes forward without further consideration, is that the scope will be defined by maxing out the traffic capacity. It will max it out, which does not allow this town board to look at lesser iterations of development. This is 233%. This is a mega warehouse complex. This isn't rezoning to allow a warehouse use in there.
Alternative, John, 4.4, that's why we added, is to back into a.
Right,
So
we would
that's-
max out,
Well,
yeah.
and,
What I,
but
For the whole
Jim, I'm
park.
sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if the maximum amount of development under this proposal without 8.2 maxes you out. I don't know if this is more or less.
I don't either, that's why we
That's
should
why
look
we're
at our
doing it.
alternatives, right, that's why.
That's why we're hesitant.
Well, but that's what the scope is asking you to, that's what the scope asks to find out. The only way to find out the answer is
Exactly.
to do the study.
Well, no, you can study, don't allow any increased building beyond what's allowed now and change the use.
You can get there in this scope.
You won't unless it so happens that the traffic maximum happens to be what the current allowed build is, which would be an extraordinary coincidence.
Well,
Why not just set that as a reasonable alternative to begin with, rezone the uses and evaluate that instead of allowing 233% more build.
Well, but what the scope does is it asks for trip generation from the range of uses allowed. So it does that. So in other words, we're not just looking at what a giant warehouse might be, we're also looking at the other uses allowed by the zone.
Right. But the current zoning allows 1.5 million square feet of those uses. That's what I'm saying a reasonable alternative is to
That's the
change.
one, and I think I said substantively, I thought the one comment that we might, and if you wanted to amend the scope, would be to include your alternative, which is the 2.5 million square feet. I think that's a data point that might be useful to have. But I think I frankly think we can get there through 4.4, which allows us.
That's the first time anybody said anything that agrees with me all night tonight. Thank you, Stu.
Okay.
John, I amended a lot of this for your comments, and I did.
I got a question.
Yeah.
When Global goes back through, reviews this, when were their comments going to get implemented?
If you have a public scoping period, then they will have whatever time you allow for public scoping, which is a minimum of.
30 days.
There's not a
30 days.
minimum, actually.
There's no provision
Yeah, there's-
in the regulation for it, but it's 60 days. If the applicant went ahead and proposed a draft scope.
Sorry, Darren, whoever's speaking, if they could get in front of a microphone, please.
Yeah, we got it.
A few weeks back.
And that's Leah, Tim.
I just
Sorry about
want them
that.
to make sure that their concerns are addressed here. They have that chance. They've asked for it now twice. In a letter, they showed up here tonight. I think, to be fair, they should have an input.
And again,
That-
Make
then it's a
sure
public
it
scoping.
gets addressed, though.
Right, can I just, so if the majority of the board were to agree with that, I think you would set a public scoping period. Because while they have said they want the input, they haven't given us anything specific. And the mechanism that SECRA provides is the public scoping period.
Okay, and we understand from Leah that, we're not required to do any public scoping period because we've gone through this before. Is that correct, Leah? Okay, oh, you know,
Correct. It's
what,
because this is an SEIS, a supplemental EIS, and not an original EIS, that there's no scoping session required.
Right.
To answer the question earlier that I was trying to answer, but I don't think Councilman Dunn was able to hear me, the regulations don't set out a explicit timeframe that you have to impose for scoping. If you wanted to open this up to public scoping, you could do so, and you could select your own amount of time. The regulations do have a 60-day period when an applicant provides a draft scope to the board for consideration, and you undertake the scoping. It's supposed to be concluded within 60 days. That's not exactly the situation we're in, but 60 days, 30 days, that sort of time frame would be typical. Stu, would you agree?
Okay.
Didn't you say that because this is an SEIS, the formal scoping provisions of the regs don't even apply, right? So this is really
That's correct.
informal is what we're doing, right?
The alternative to a scoping session is the board simply identifying the scope that it wants to
Right.
impose upon the EIS process.
Those deadlines, 30, 60 days, they don't apply because this is an SEIS, right?
I only mentioned the 60 days to help identify what the typical amount of
Typical,
time would
okay.
be in a analogous situation.
well, I mean, my sense is I would like to move forward. I want the information. Traffic is, you know, a huge part of this to me. Stu, what would be the impact if the board amended section 4.4 after the word evaluated to put a comma and say including a reduction to 2.5 million square feet?
We could do that, or we could do it in a separate bullet. Let me think about that for a second. I would rather make it a separate.
I'm not clear where the 2.5 million square feet number has become. That's not what, you know, was requested here, right? And I'm not sure how that number has now become relevant here.
John has suggested that as an alternative. If you wanted to include
Okay.
it, I would make it a separate 4.4 and renumber 4.4 to 4.5, because 4.4 has a specific purpose that's not the same.
I feel like the 2.5 million is rather arbitrary, and I would be more open to you know, other less restrictive or you know, not putting a number on it and leaving it open rather than prescribing a somewhat arbitrary number.
And that's, I think, what 4.4 does. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stu.
That's the intent.
That's the intent of section 4.4.
Right. Well, yeah.
Okay, anything else? Cynthia, did you want to address anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just one final comment. You know, to my way of thinking, Global Foundries, been here since 2009, spent $15 billion, hired 3,000 employees, funded the Global Foundries Malta Foundation, and many other things for this community. They've earned the right to have another few weeks to comment on this thing, to my way of thinking. And I think this sends the wrong message to them, as I've told them, you know, myself. It may be that this project ultimately, in some form or fashion, makes sense for the town, and if it does, I'm going to support it. But this isn't just pie in the sky. We might do this, we might do that. These guys have spent $15 billion. There's 3,000 folks over there. They've earned the right for a few weeks extra time to comment on this thing, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
And I agree with that.
But again, if we do that, then we are in essence having a public scoping document where and I mean, not that
Yeah.
I'm opposed to that either.
We would not recommend opening scoping up to one distinct class of entity, of neighbor, for a number of reasons. If the board feels strongly about opening this up to comment, we would suggest using the process it's set forth in the secret regulations. Otherwise, we would suggest that the board adopt the scope itself. Obviously, nothing prevents anybody from coming in here and giving comments during the beginning of a town board meeting. And certainly, anybody that wanted to do so could do so, but that's not the same as an open scoping session. We're a little
What are
concerned.
the risks if we do that we allow them to comment? What are the legal risks to the town?
Well, you know, there may not be any identifiable legal
Okay.
risks, and Stu can jump in if he has experience in these sorts of matters, but here we have a number of involved agencies that are actually involved in the coordinated review process with this board, who wouldn't then be given the opportunity to comment on the scope, while Global Foundries would be provided that opportunity.
Well,
It seems like that's not in keeping with the spirit of the regulations,
okay, well,
but
why don't we just table this for, a month? And we won't officially ask them for comments. If they come forward with comments, we can hear what they say and go forward at that time.
Well, that would be postponing it until the end of April, the agenda meeting for the May session.
There you go.
In time for giving Stu a chance to address questions that have been raised in either revising or not revising the scoping document, not to open this up to any kind of formal secret scoping.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's the issue. Cynthia, am I right? Is that what you're?
I can support that, although, Stu also said that he doesn't expect it to change much, but more importantly, it would give time to incorporate some of John's comments. I didn't really think feel like some of them are sort of addressed anyway, but.
So is that how you'd like to proceed, Cynthia? Because it's kind of key what you want to do here.
I know,
All those students in the audience who thought it would be easy.
I
Get a
know.
big spotlight on Cynthia.
Jeez.
Before you get to that, Stu or Leah, I mean, what it sounds to me is they're talking about not scheduling a public scoping, but adjourning, in a sense, this review of this scope document to include other concerns of the board members. Could that be done in a special meeting, that we wouldn't need to wait if there was sufficient time for the board to do that?
Sure, that would absolutely be a way to do it. It's just set a special meeting. That would give us time to address the comments John has delivered today and any other comments you might happen to receive by the time of the special meeting. I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, so you want to do that, and then either I could call a special meeting or two members of the board could call a special meeting. I think that's the rule, but whatever the rule is, that's what we'd follow. And it would depend on you, Stu, whether you're able to, do the revisions if necessary, or answer the questions in connection with the scoping document. And, although we wouldn't be opening it up to any more scoping, we would certainly take into account anything anybody wants to say, as we always do. I mean, we get emails on a daily basis that we consider.
So
does
that I'm clear, I mean, everything that we've done thus far has been very public. Global Foundries has spoken out a number of times on this, and there's been a significant amount of information exchange. We're trying to approve a scoping document so that we can get more data and information. Our engineering consultants have told us delaying that approval of that scoping document will not change the document, yet we want to push this out another month. That to do what? That's what I don't understand. I mean, nothing's precluding Global Foundries from offering their opinion, as has been noted in the many times that they have offered their opinion on this project, both in town board meetings and via email. So I'm not comfortable with pushing this out without a good reason. I mean, we're trying to get a review in place so that we actually have real information and real data, information that we would have had if we had some of these traffic studies done previously. We don't have that information at our fingertips. The longer we wait, the longer we go without information, the longer the public goes without this information. So I would strongly encourage us to move forward to get this information. And I'm sure there's nothing stopping us as a town board from slamming the brakes on. If we get information, if we don't feel like there's adequate information to proceed, we can slam the brakes on. This isn't approving a project. We're approving a scoping document so that we can get information and have clear, accurate data for the applicants and the applicant and the residents, as well as Global Foundries. So I would strongly encourage us to move forward with this so that we can have that data and do so in a public and transparent manner.
We're talking about, this is an evaluation effort. The secret process is to evaluate impacts of something. We don't even have the something yet. We don't have the something. From the outset, the EAF was blank. It was blank in 8 or 10 critical areas. It said, it'll be disclosed in the secret process. Well, the secret process is supposed to evaluate the impact of what it is you're doing. You're not telling us what you're doing. let's, you know, this is like Alice in Wonderland, this discussion. You know, this
It
is
is.
what we did with Global Foundries. Global Foundries came in, they showed us what we were doing, they wanted to do. We had long discussions about it. We then went forward to evaluate the impact of what they told us specifically they wanted to do and what we agreed we were prepared to consider doing. That's not going on here.
Well,
It just-
that's why we need to do this scoping document to start this traffic study and know exactly what we're talking about. Kicking the can down the road another month doesn't give us any better information. It just gives us another month without data.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, that's the
you
way,
know-
that's the way I see it, you know, after hearing Stu say, you know, he doesn't think that this is gonna, you know, change the scoping document, you know, yeah, I'd be fine with moving forward, you know, with the obvious caveat that, you know, we'll accept any information from anybody at any time, you know, bearing on this issue. So, I don't know, Cynthia, how do you feel?
I can move forward.
Okay, is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Carried, you have that vote, Jen? Okay, thank you very much. Moving to the next item is setting a public hearing date for code revisions to Chapter 115 and Chapter 88. This is a motion that would apply during states of emergencies where restaurants and retail establishments are prohibited from going to their capacity indoor and having to limit the number of patrons they can have inside. This would apply in emergency situations, and it would make slight changes to the noise regulation and the fees for constructing a tent so that they can increase the ability to, you know, serve their patrons.
So
Do we
moved.
have, do we
If
have
I
a,
could, please?
do we have a, what?
I'm sorry, I just,
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion made by Cynthia, seconded by Tim. Discussion.
Hey, Darren, I have a question on this.
Sure.
Will the acoustic ordinance be addressed afterwards to kind of clean it up afterwards?
I'm sorry, Craig, I didn't get that. What?
Is the 65, is the 65 decibels going to be switched afterwards? So it isn't at 65 in the future?
It basically just changes the time, Craig, in terms of how late that goes.
And it's up to 75
It
decibels, isn't it?
extends the daytime to give them an extra hour, is where we were going here. You know, it's basically the same as the executive order that was in place
That
during
we had.
a year ago, yeah.
But is
Yeah.
that going to change going forward in the future also?
This would only apply if there's a declared state of emergency.
During the state of
Yeah.
emergency? What's going to happen afterwards, though?
Well, when
Are we
they can
gonna
go back to,
Is the 65 going to increase to something higher? Because 65 is not reasonable. That isn't in there.
well,
Right now, I think ours is at 65. At 65 decibels at 9 o'clock in the evening, Route 9 is 65 decibels. So that ordinance is not reasonable to have it at 65. So
I'm not sure where 65 is coming from. I'm not seeing that in the resolution.
I'm saying, not in this resolution, but we have to change our noise ordinance in the future. So 65 is increased because 65 is not reasonable.
okay, I think that's a good point. Yeah, this increases it to 75 for the emergencies.
Here
but-
it's 75.
Yeah, but you're saying that
Afterwards.
we should change it to 75 permanently. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I think,
Evan,
you know,
yeah.
what we were looking for here, what I know that was hoping for here is, you know, given that the noise ordinance is got a lot to work through, this is just a
Yeah.
matter of during this during this time of crisis, kind of giving these bars and restaurants a chance to do outdoor music and things like that.
I understand that.
Help. Yeah,
And
but I do agree with you. I think at some point
And I'm
we do need to look at
fully
the
on
ordinance
with
as a
it.
whole.
But what I
Yeah.
am saying is that after this crisis is overwards, we got to go back and clean
Yeah.
up how it is in the future.
I agree.
Okay, I agree.
Darren, did we actually have complaints
Yeah.
before with noise?
Yeah.
Were there businesses that were violating?
That's when I headed out there and I got the 65 and I'm going, 65 decibels is the cars going by on Route 9. It's at 9 o'clock in the evening. And that's our max throughout town? That makes no sense.
Was it with all businesses or?
It was right out on Route 9. I was getting 65 decibels at 9 o'clock in the evening. That's our max right now. It makes no sense
Yeah,
whatsoever.
I mean, I agree, Craig, that we have that problem and other problems with our noise ordinance. I mean, if you apply it literally, you basically wouldn't be able to play a musical instrument in
Yeah.
your house because the people next door could hear lyrics or be able to identify the music or something like that. So yes, it's an issue, I agree. But that's not an argument to defeat this one,
It doesn't
Right.
affect this.
Yeah.
I support this, but what I'm also saying is, after the situation we have, we got to go back and clean up that.
All right, I agree with that. Any other discussion on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, so we'll have the public hearing at the agenda meeting at the end of the month, I think. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to authorize the closing of the Highway Administrative Office Capital Project. That's the new garage and transferring the small remaining fund.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item on the agenda is to approve the service award program for Round Lake Hose.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next item is the same resolution with respect to Malta Ridge.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Too quick for me, Craig.
It doesn't happen too often, though, Tim.
Did you pass this down to Craig? Any other discussion on Malta Ridge? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, next is, hold on. The next item on the agenda is to appoint a lovely young lady, Katia Uvegis, as a full-time maintenance custodian worker.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I'll just say that I had the opportunity to meet Katia, and Terry went through a process to find a person who could replace the fabulous Matt, and he's done that in the person of Katia Uvegis, and so, yes, I'm in favor of this motion, and I would like to welcome her to the town. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Okay. Any other business tonight? Additional comments from town residents. Would any of the residents, anybody online or in the room, care to address the board on any subject? Okay, next, let's see, Mark, you had an issue that, about property.
Darren, you
cost?
do have a hand.
Okay, I think, Mark had an issue about property transaction costs that I think that's appropriate topic for executive session. Is that right? Possible opportunities for the town to purchase property and prices.
Provided it's not public information.
Right, no, and it.
Yes, it is an appropriate conversation for executive session, provided it's not a widely known project or already out in the public.
Right, and it isn't. Okay, so I'd ask that we go into executive session, and do I need a second on that, or?
Second.
Yes.
Discussion? Okay, and I'll just state for the people on board, we have no other comments to make. I'm going to recognize you, Kathy, in a moment. But after,
Darren, before you get to that, with respect to the motion that you're going in there, only thing I would add is that we weren't overly specific to the public to say what you just said is property transaction. I think you need to give the public more information that the board is what they're considering.
I think the issue is.
The statute says the discussion of the acquisition of real estate, a public discussion might affect the value thereof or something. So this clearly falls within that. I would move that we go into executive session to discuss possible acquisition of real estate.
Sorry.
Closure of which might affect the value thereof, and respectfully request a second.
Second.
All right, further discussion? And I'll say that after this motion, I'll recognize you, Kathy, if you still want to talk, and then I'll say that would end our business for tonight, so there's no reason why people on Zoom need to stay, because we're not going to have any other discussions worthy of attention, except to adjourn after the executive session. That being said, all in favor of executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, Kathy, did you want to address the board quickly?
Yes, I just wanted to tell Kevin, thank you so much for checking on that, and we look forward to having that reinstalled. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.